tell me your names?
I'm John Young.
I'm Margaret Young, Peggy.
Okay, so let's begin. What is your first memory
Of
of just life?
life, huh? I went to school in Holy Name kindergarten, and I remember that. That's my first really remembrance of what was going on. I was probably 5.
Oh, okay.
Mine.
Yeah.
The way we took baths, we had a round tub in the kitchen, in the middle of the room. And I was getting a bath one night. I was a little girl, probably 4, but I remember it. And the neighbors came to visit, and they had some teenage boys. And I was so embarrassed to be sitting in the bathtub, right in the middle of the kitchen.
Okay. What kind of hardships did your family experience while you were kids and growing up?
Well, depression. It was depression time, and Dad had trouble keeping jobs. So that was basically, we didn't do much other than as a family. He was out working or trying to make a living. That's basically what my memories of hardships.
We lived on a farm, so we had plenty of food. But I remember that the feed sacks that they would buy would have printed material. And so this was very common. Grandma would say to Grandpa, when you go in to get some more feed, get 2 sacks because I need to make Peggy a dress. And then she made me a dress out of the feed sacks.
Did your family have special ways of celebrating like specific holidays?
Like what?
Have special ways of celebrating specific holidays? Like getting together somewhere?
I really don't remember a lot of holidays. When I was growing up, we had a restaurant, and so they opened a lot of holidays. Only holiday I can actually remember, I went to my grandma Young's in Missouri Valley, and she served Christmas dinner one day on Christmas. And she served meatloaf. That was her specialty, meatloaf.
And we would go over to Grandma and Grandpa McQuiston's, and they always had oyster stew, the whole family, on Christmas Eve in the evening. And then I was the one that had taken piano lessons, so I would play the piano and we'd sing some Christmas carols.
Do you remember how your parents met?
Well, Dad lived in Missouri Valley, and Mom lived in California Junction, which is about 4 miles. So other than that, they must have met on the farm building, or in town. I've never heard how they actually met.
My dad farmed, and his cousin farmed, and Grandma taught at Thurston, Nebraska, when she was out of college. And her friend married my dad's cousin. And so they invited us, the teachers, out to spend some time at parties, and my dad would be invited, and that's how they met.
How did you two meet?
You tell that.
Well, Peggy Thompson was a classmate of mine in nurses training, and Skip Smith was a boy from Blair that she dated, and he didn't have a car. So when he wanted to come down and see her, he had to ask someone to drive a car, and he asked Grandpa one time. And Peggy and I were out walking. We would go down to the Hinky Dinky and get a whole package of cinnamon rolls, and then we'd eat them on the way home. We were coming home, and there they were, so that's how I met him.
Have you traveled anywhere outside of the United States?
Oh, yeah.
Like whereabouts?
Well,
Canada.
Mexico, Germany, Austria, England, Scotland, Ireland.
And I went to Paris.
She went all those other ones, but then she went to Paris by herself.
Okay. Where were you at the time when you heard the news that President John F. Kennedy has been shot?
I do not recall. I really don't.
I do. I was at home and I heard it on the radio, on the television. And it was just a shock. It was just a terrible, terrible shock.
Have you ever been in a big storm, such as a tornado or a big snowstorm?
Not really. When I worked for Pepsi-Cola, a big tornado came through on 84th Street. Now I was gone, I wasn't there, and it just wiped out a whole swath of Omaha. And I worked on 72nd, which would be a mile, but I was home already. I was head of the storm. I'd gotten off and went home, so I wasn't involved in the storm. I just saw the results the next day.
A tornado hit our farm, and I was in nurse's training, so I wasn't there. But it took a bunch of hog sheds, and hogs were strewn all over the area, and people came out, neighbors and people came out from town to walk through the fields to pick up the wood and the dead pigs.
Okay. Can you describe your house when you were growing up?
Mom and Dad had a restaurant. They both went to work early, like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I would run down there, have breakfast at the cafe, then go to school.
Okay.
You ate down there in the evening.
Well, no, like describe your house.
Inside the house,
Yeah, like inside.
well, 2-bedroom, full finished garage or finished basement, 1 bath, kitchen, living room, 1-car garage.
I was raised out on the farm, big farmhouse, but I didn't move there till I was 8. Before that, we lived in another house about a mile away that also belonged to my grandfather. And it didn't have any electricity, it didn't have any of the modern conveniences. We had an outhouse we had to go out to. We had a pump that could pump water inside, but we had to use lamps. And we had a little stove in the dining room that gave us the heat. There was no basement. And so in the wintertime, we'd gather around the stove to get dressed. It was so cold.
Just describe a typical day at your house.
My growing up house or our house?
Just at your growing up house.
Growing up there. Well, that's right. I mentioned earlier. You know,
Yeah.
we left town, we go down to eat breakfast at the restaurant. I'd go to school from there. Spend the rest of the day in school and come home. That's about it.
You'd run and get some food at noon and then run
Yeah,
back and play
right.
basketball.
Yeah, I would 1 hour. We had an hour. So, you know, you'd go out for 12 and go back at 1. I would run down, get a bite to eat, then run back and play baseball at the school.
Okay.
And we had a little country school, and we walked half a mile to get there. And we brought water down from another house, so we had water there to drink, but we had outhouses. We didn't have any bathrooms, and no electricity when I was young. And describing our day, I have 4 brothers, and they would go out and help my dad with work outside. And I didn't have much to do. Mother loved to work. She loved to cook. She loved to go out to her garden, and she would do all that. And so when I got up, I would do the dishes, and then if it was time for school, I'd get ready for school.
Okay. Have you met anyone that's like a celebrity? Met anyone famous?
Like what now?
Like, have you met anyone
Celebrity.
famous, like a movie star or a singer or something?
Well, I met Gabby Hayes. He stopped in a restaurant one day and we shook his hand. And what was somebody else? We saw from a distance. I saw from a distance Marilyn Monroe and Joey Brown and Vivian Lee, was it? Married to.
It was Some Like It Hot.
You know, they were filming something like that out in California. We we saw them. Well, I didn't actually meet any of them.
You just saw them
But we
filming.
did meet Gabby, and he was probably, and the only other person I can remember ever that was important was Richard Nixon. At that time, he worked for Pepsi-Cola as a lawyer, and we went to a meeting with Pepsi down in Omaha, and he was there. We got his autograph. While he was president. No, after he was president. He'd be after he's president, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I met anybody famous, but when he saw Marilyn Monroe from a distance, she came walking right by me. So I was real close to her, a very pretty woman. And I really haven't, I enjoyed meeting the Creighton basketball team. We would go with our teammates and have them sign their name, and that was fun. I enjoyed that.
What were some activities that you and your family liked to do when you were growing up?
Well, Mom and Dad worked all day, and sometime in the evening they would go out to eat, and I didn't go with them very often. But there was a time we went to Omaha, and it had chicken at, heck was the name of that place, Peggy?
I don't remember anymore.
Anyway, we had a chicken place in Omaha that we liked to go to. They took me there a couple times, but that was after school and everything else.
Tell him when you stayed with your grandpa, what he used to listen to on the radio.
Well, he listened to Fibber McGee and Molly. You don't know them. Amos and Andy.
Okay.
Gildersleeve. He would listen on the radio now. It wasn't TV in those days. This was all radio.
Okay.
And we would listen to the radio at our house and play some cards. Pinochle is what they played. Mother and Dad played bridge. We sat around the kitchen table a lot. When Grandpa and Grandma would come over, we'd sit around the kitchen table and Mother would make homemade lemonade. And she always had cake.
Okay.
It was fun.
Can you describe what happened on your wedding day?
Got married.
Yes, we got married.
I don't remember much about it. I know it was in Pender, and
It was icy.
it was icy that day. It was cold. We drove to Grand Island after the wedding, which was a pretty good distance.
On the ice.
And I promised her dad I'd call him when we got there, which I did.
Good.
And my aunt came in just as Dad and I were going to walk down the aisle, and she said, "What a terrible icy day for you to get married in." But at the reception, my Scottish grandfather danced the part of the sword dance for us.
Okay. Can you describe what your first job was?
I drove truck in Washington State for a farmer. That's the first job I remember having. I did detassel corn when I was younger, but that's the first real job I had. And that didn't last very long, by the way.
Okay.
And I didn't work until after I went through nurses training, and then I got a job on one of the wards at University Hospital where I had gone to school.
Okay. Can you tell me about your funniest friend?
Funniest friends?
Yeah, the funniest.
Oh, I had quite a few of them. I don't remember anything funny they did, but they would just joke around and laugh a lot. But his name was Leonard Sorensen,
Okay.
and I met him in actually first year of college when I met him, and we became good friends.
Okay.
Leonard was the funniest one I ever saw, too. He was a funny and good friend.
Yep, he was a good friend.
Okay. Can you tell me just a story about a family party that you remember when you were little?
Family party.
Just
Nothing
something
comes to mind.
Something that happened that you remember?
Nothing comes to mind at all on that. Like I said, they worked 7 days a week, so they didn't have a lot of free time to do other things. I don't remember any parties. I really don't.
Okay.
I remember my class, there were 23 of us and in high school, and we decided we'd have a barn dance. And so they all came out the night before, and we all cleaned the upper level of the barn. And then our teacher came
At the
out.
school?
Huh?
At the school?
No, at our barn.
Oh, your barn.
But the whole class came out. We were freshmen. And the teacher was our sponsor, and she came out too, and she wanted to teach us how to square dance, and none of us wanted to. So she got mad at us, and she went in the house and talked to Mother, and we just plain danced. And then my dad told me years later, he said, I was in the barn worrying that there was that one boy would smoke a cigarette and set the barn on fire.
Okay,
So Grandpa was there to protect the barn.
that's good. What was the hardest thing that you went through when you were little, and how did you overcome it?
Hardest thing that when I was little, well, I had polio when I was 15,
Okay.
and I spent 3.5 months in the hospital, and as I recall, there was a lot of pain involved with it, but I came out of it pretty good. There were 3 of us from Blair that went in the hospital the same week, and I'm the only one that came out walking.
So you're lucky.
Yeah.
What was the question? I forgot already.
What is the hardest thing that you went through when you were little, and how did you overcome it?
I was extremely shy,
Okay.
and I didn't overcome it until the last few years of my life. I've been shy for years, but I've learned that I can reach out to people and ask them questions and get them interested in themselves, and it works. Then they talk with you. But I was very shy for years.
Okay. What is the most embarrassing thing that your mom or dad has ever done to you?
Go ahead, I can't think of anything right now.
Well, I remember I went down to visit my Aunt Jean in Lincoln, and we were totally used to having 3 great big meals a day on the farm. And when we had our lunch at Aunt Jean's, we just had sandwiches, which is normal, but it wasn't normal for our family. So when I got home, I said, Dad, she just had sandwiches at lunch. And he thought that was so funny, so he teased his sister about it. And I was so embarrassed that he brought it up to her.
I still can't think of anything embarrassing that they actually embarrassed me with.
You just want to come back to it later?
Well, I don't think I've been thinking about it, and I don't come up with anything right off the spur of the moment anyway, so
Okay.
probably not.
Have you ever been mentioned in the town's newspaper
Yeah.
Lots.
about?
Sports. I played baseball and basketball and football in high school, and they'd write articles about it. And once in a while, we'd get a write-up about what I've done or didn't do. That was about the only time I guess in the paper for anything.
And our marriage.
I suppose that was in there.
We didn't have sports for girls, but we had our picture in the little town's paper for a variety of things. I went to Girls State, they put my picture in, and I was homecoming queen, they put me in there. And seems like a variety of things we'd be in the paper.
Okay. Do you have any favorite stories about your kids? Like about Mom or Uncle Tim or someone?
Oh, the kids were good. They didn't give us a lot of problems. We find out later on that they weren't quite as good as we thought they were, but they tell stories what they had done. But I guess Pam was the one that didn't cause any trouble, but told us more afterwards. I don't remember any of the kids ever do anything ornery or outstanding, or I had to sit down and scold them or anything.
They each one, acted differently when they were going to go out and they didn't want to talk to us about it. And Rusty would just say, oh, I'm going out. Boom, he'd be gone. And then Tim came and he'd say, I've got something to do. And he'd disappear. And Pam did it, and Terry did that, and Beth would stand there and explain what she was going to do and where she was going to go, and goodbye. The way she
the
would.
only one.
So she was more descriptive, but she still slid out the door before I could open my mouth.
Have you ever gotten in trouble at school?
Well, I probably have, but I don't recall anything. I went to the principal once, but I don't know why. Showed up to him, and I recommended her. I suppose he was doing something that I'd done wrong, but I don't remember anything that stands out in my mind anyway. I don't think I got in much trouble at school.
Okay.
I did one time. I went down with my girlfriend Doris to the typing room because she had some typing she had to do. And so I just asked if I could go, and I didn't tell the homeroom teacher that I wasn't taking typing. So we went down there and we visited as she did her work. And then the very next morning, the principal came to me and he said, Peggy, will you come in and type up the absentees? And I thought, oh dear, well, I can look at the keys. So I said, okay. So I walked in there, and it was a typewriter that had no names on the keys.
Like
I'd
no
never seen
letters?
one. No letters. So I had to admit to him that I didn't know how to type.
Do you remember, have you ever skipped school?
Well, I'm sure I did, but nothing comes to mind that I actually skipped the senior skip day. You always had a skip day there, and I did skip for that.
Was there like a reason why?
That was planned.
Yeah, that was planned to skip. The whole class the senior class would skip out. I don't know if they still do that or not, but I did skip them. I don't think I ever skipped school. I like school.
Okay.
I enjoyed going.
The only time I did, I was in first grade, and it was my birthday, and it was October, and I was 5, so that was just a month after school started. And we always went home for lunch. We went up the hill to our house, and Mother had cooked carrots, and I didn't like cooked carrots. And she said, you need to eat those before you go back down to school. Well, then the county superintendent and Dad were friends, and so they were in the other room talking about school. And Mother was in there with them, and they didn't notice, but I sat there, and it got too late, and school had already started. So Mother said, you run down to school then. So I ran down there, but I didn't want to go in late, so I just sat under a bush. And a boy came outside to go to the outhouse, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just sitting here. So he told the teacher, and she came out and she said, Peggy, would you like to go to school? And I said, no. So I did go in eventually because the parents would bring treats for our birthdays. So Grandma came down, and apparently she saw where I was because she came and got me. Then we went in the school and gave the treats for my birthday, and then I stayed in school the rest of the day.
Okay. Do you remember how you chose your children's names?
Well, the Rusty was John the Third, so that was named after my family, myself and my dad, and that's all that I remember naming it. I suppose I had some input, but
Well, Tim, his middle name is Edward, and that's my father's name.
Okay.
And we just like the name Tim. And Pamela Jane, we like that name. Teresa Margaret, Margaret's my mother's name and mine. And then Beth is Elizabeth Ann, and we just like that name, so we gave it to her.
Okay. Can you tell me about the time that you had polio? If you have had polio before?
tell you about it.
Yeah.
Well, no, I tell you, I wasn't feeling, well, I was out for football practice, and I made a run, and I got the end of the run, and I I couldn't get up, I couldn't move. I said, what's something wrong? I don't feel good or something, my legs hurt. So I went home, I think that was a Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday. And I went home and that was the start of it. And the doctors didn't recognize what it was in Blair.
Okay.
And they had a man that came up that was in the Army, and he wanted to give me a rub down, thought that would help, and it didn't help any. And finally they took me down to St. Joseph Hospital, and I walked in the polio ward there. And they knew right away that I had it, so then I spent 3.5 months in the St. Joe Hospital.
And you were in isolation?
Yeah, I couldn't see anybody. Folks couldn't get in, and then Betty and my sister and her husband had a baby, their first baby, and they drove by the hospital, but they couldn't bring him in. So I was pretty isolated for a while. Then I got home in time for Christmas. That was...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And you also said that the iron lung was right outside your door.
Yeah, they told me that the next day. I was having so much pain, and I don't know what my breathing was bad or not. I don't remember. They said the next day, and I showed an improvement that overnight, and they said they had the iron lung outside my door, that if I had gotten any worse, they were going to put me in the iron lung, which was bad.
Do you know what that is?
What?
Help you breathe.
It's a whole enclosed thing that they would put him inside of, close it up, and then it would bring in the air, the oxygen for him and help him breathe.
Yeah. It was a painful time in my life. It was a lot of pain. Then when the pain went away, of course, then I lost one leg of it. I mean, one leg with no muscles in one leg. And that's still in effect.
Have you ever seen that on Grandpa's leg?
Mm-mm.
Show him.
We can
We're
do
the
it.
ones I want to put in front of the camera.
Okay.
Your friend polio.
I didn't. I just heard about it when I was in nurses training. It was pretty much the end of it. You know, they had the vaccine.
The vaccine came out about, what, 5-6 years later?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And first it was, you know, they put it on a sugar cube. They put the vaccine on a sugar cube, then we swallowed ate the sugar cube.
When was that, about in the 51, something like that?
It was a little after that because
After that, yeah.
because I was married to you then.
I think I was married, I think I was 45 or 46 is when I got it. And that vaccine, the Salk vaccine, came out. Well, I suppose in the next 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. I don't remember, but too late for me. But
Yeah.
And everyone was afraid of it because they didn't know how it was carried. And my dad wanted us to learn how to swim. And so he drove us in from the farm to the night when we had swimming lessons. And so we'd take our lesson, and then we didn't do any practicing. We went back home. And then the next week, they'd teach us a new stroke. And we didn't have any time to practice it. And we went home. So I took the lessons, but I really am not a good swimmer because I never did practice. Because Dad was afraid we'd get polio in the swimming pool.
If you could give any advice to me and my 3 brothers, what would it be?
behave yourselves.
Keep positive. Have a real positive attitude, because if you have a positive attitude, it helps you through life. And keep your sense of humor, because that's important too. And love your family.
Oh, am I supposed to look at that?
Go, however you want to do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jack.
Nice to meet you.
Jack is
Nice to
a
meet you.
freshman in high school, 15 years old.
Yeah, 14.
Well, you're 14, not quite 15.
15 and
Look
2
how
months.
tall he is.
That's right, 2 months.
He got shoes on anyway.
Goodbye.